let's start. Thanks.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you everyone for joining with me for my pre-submission presentation. So today I'll be presenting my thesis, the research, and the outcomes of the research. So my research is advancing effective computing with self-structuring AI, and my supervisors are Professor Daminda and Associate Professor Daswin Disilla. So first of all, I will go through the agenda a little bit. So I'll be talking about the significance of emotions in digital applications and some theories on effective computing. And then I'll go into my research questions. So the presentation will be structured based on the research questions. First one looking at the overall emotions in digital environments. The second research question looking at the computational models that we have developed in this research. And lastly, the applications where the developed computation models were applied to. So first of all, if you take emotions, so we all know that emotions are integral part of our life. So first of all, even not only in humans, but even in animals, from evolution theories that we know, emotions have emerged as a survival technique. And also, if we take from psychology perspective, we know that emotions shape the individual's thoughts and personality. And it's also a social construct. So we interact with people, we share our emotions, and these interactions are a core part in our life as well. And there's lots of research on how emotions aid the rational thinking and decision making, how emotions influence our decision making. And from a neurobiology perspective, there's been studies conducted to show that emotions can actually impact the plasticity of the brain, which can in turn impact the individuality and decision making of a person. Also, we know that whatever physiological changes happen in our human body can impact the emotions, and that goes vice versa. So, from all this, we can conclude that from an early mammalian to 21st century human, and now to an era of futuristic droids, emotions have emerged as a vital component in our human life. So at present, we are here. So we know that 21st century in a human, we use lots of digital applications, and these applications interact with our life more than we know. So all this information captured by the digital applications have collected our emotion information. So data, so applications like chatbots, mobile assistants, social media applications, emotion detection sensors, and even audio, video, image, emotion recognition applications, and virtual applications, they all collect or sense our emotions, and they have projected those emotion behaviors into a digital space. So uh, that actually has created the digital environments to capture our emotion information. And from that, we are now progressing towards most of the researchers are focusing on mimicking human-like behaviors into future applications that is basically based on emotions and cognitive abilities. So this creates a need for AI to understand and respond to emotions. So AI should deviate from merely problem solution centric logic to incorporate emotion information also in their applications. So the AI can perceive the emotions and adapt accordingly. So this gives the birth to a human-centric AI, and more researchers are focusing on this path at present. So this is actually based on affective computing theories, which came into play in 2000. So affective computing is known as computing that relates to, arises from, or influences emotions. So the core idea is that when a person expresses their emotions in a human computer interactive interface, it would be unintelligent for a machine if the expressed emotions are not captured and they are not responded to. So the motivation for affective computing research is to simulate empathy and identify emotions, interpret emotions, and ultimately respond to their emotions. So this actually sets the foundation for my research. With this, the key research focus of my research is to advance effective modeling in digital environments using self-structuring AI to capture and characterize emotions. So I will talk about my research questions. So the first research question is, what are the digital forms of human emotions and effects, and how these are captured and represented in hyperconnected digital environments? And how can the neurobiological, psychological, and social theories of emotions inspire the self-structuring AI models? So that will set the background and the conceptual underlining for the research. And next, the research question is, how can this self-structuring AI be used to develop computational models to capture the emotion representations and emotion dynamics of individuals in digital environments? Then first, I'll talk about what are the current limitations and what are the improvements that we need to do in the systems. And then I will go through the developed computational models which can represent emotions and emotion dynamics. The third research question is, how can the identification of emotion dynamics in data intensive environments advance the AI systems in digital health, smart cities, communities, and industrial settings? So first, I will go through my first research question. So what are the digital forms of human emotion and effects, and how these are represented in digital environments? So as I mentioned earlier, there's people use a range of applications from social media conversations to emotions sensed through biosensors, emotion recognition tools, image, video, audio, and even virtual technologies which capture emotion data. So all these emotion information are scattered in the digital space, and there is a need to model the emotions so we can actually make use of what they represent. And the emotions expressed on hyperconnected digital environments are volatile. They change over time. For example, if you take social media, there's millions of information generated in a second. So that will encapsulate people's emotions, feelings, all that. So it's highly dynamic, and the emotions they change over time. They interact with other elements, and they contain unique characteristics. So emotions is like another fingerprint for an individual. So they contain unique characteristics, and ultimately emotions they behave as a system. So this actually make why we need to use self-structuring AI over supervised machine learning methods, because the traditional machine learning methods can fail and can fail in capturing these dynamics in digital environments. So I will explain those a little bit further in upcoming slides. So the next research question is, how can we use the neurobiological, psychological, and social theories of emotions to inspire self-structuring AI models. So the reason is to advance the current emotion modeling, we should combine or align the development of AI with established theories of emotions. So then only we can capture the real dynamics and the characteristics of the emotions, because it's backed by the theories of emotion. So I will go through some of these theoretical aspects of emotions that inspired to develop the computational models. So first one is the differential emotions theory. So the core principle of this theory is that it establishes that emotions act as a system. So emotion of a person or a group is sensitive to the changes in the external environment, as we can see here. And once it's activated, it can trigger other emotions. So they can interact between each other as well. So once we have these interactions between the emotion states, we can identify different patterns that emerge over time. So once these patterns are consolidated, we can actually call them behaviors because that will be more prominent over time. So the systems perspective of this theory is aligned with the self-organization of structure and behavior, which actually served as one of the solid foundations for the computational models to be built on. And emotion dynamics is another very important theory in psychology, where it states that emotion dynamics involves the study of trajectories, patterns, and regularities of emotions, their interactions and trajectories over time. So here in this diagram actually summarizes the features of emotion dynamics. So there's the emotion episodes, which represent a person or an individual's emotion sphere, and emotion trajectories, which uh, demonstrate the change of emotions over time. So the important thing is these emotion dynamics can actually reflect warning signs of emotion dysregulation, which can be very useful to capture in digital environments. So whenever in the digital environment something if there's extreme emotions expressed, then using emotion dynamic features we can capture them, so we can regulate or intervene as required. So this is one of the research gaps in current research. So emotion dynamics in digital environments have not been thoroughly explored in the current research. And also emotion regulation and individuality of emotions are another core theories that is underlying in this computational development. So a person's emotions are heavily dependent on that individual. So they have different activation thresholds. For example, a person might get very angry, whereas another person might take time. So they are usually not very agitated person. So different individual characteristics, which we can call as emotion activation thresholds. So these are all backed by the psychological theories of emotion. And as I mentioned earlier, emotions also contribute to the plasticity of the brain, so that which affect the individual characteristics. So that actually sets the grounds to say that we need to identify these emotion dynamics, the individualities and self-organizing nature of emotions in digital environments. However, there are certain limitations when capturing these at present. So if you take the supervised machine learning models, one of the main limitations is lack of prior knowledge and label data. So we know that digital environments are highly volatile, and the frequency of data generation is very high, and it's also context dependent. So having labeled data is practically a challenge for supervised machine learning approaches. And then another aspect is the individuality of emotions. So this is one of the aspects which been neglected in the research, because we develop the machine learning models to capture the generalized characteristics. But if you take emotions, they are highly subjective to the individual. So then a traditional machine learning model can fail in capturing those individual characteristics. And the third reason is the volatility of emotions. They change over time. They interact with other emotion states as a system. So those things can affect developing machine learning models in a supervised way. So with these theories, we suggest or propose that the use of self-structuring AI to characterize emotions in the digital environment. Based on the first research question, this is the conceptual model that I've come up with in my research. So we start from here. The emotions of a human is generated via different factors. There can be more here. All these factors affect an individual's emotions, and using a wide range of computer applications, human emotions are reflected in these digital environments. And based on these emotions, we can identify different emotion intensities, different groups of emotions, emotion changes over time, toxic emotions. So these are all uh, lying in the digital space, which creates a latent representation of emotions. And to capture meaningful outcomes from these, we use the computational models, which are powered by self-structuring AI, affective computing, and unsupervised learning. So we use these computational models to derive a representation. So we can capture the digital emotion dynamics, emotion individualities, self-structuring emotions in these digital spaces. So once these outcomes are captured, we can use them to regulate, intervene, and respond to emotional behaviors in the digital spaces. So this is the conceptual model of the research. And in my research, I'm focusing on the social media environment, mostly because can compare to other digital environments, we can capture more natural emotions in social media digital environment. So I will go through some of the reasons why social media uh, has more natural emotions than others. So the recent research, the emerging neuroscience of social media, they actually established that social media can be used as a proxy for offline behaviors. So they list out a couple of reasons why social media is useful. So main reason is that it's not synthetic, because people are actually engaging with real people. So social media is can be regarded as a platform, but people actually interact with each other as they would do in real world behaviors. And so apart from compared to data generated in artificial labs, these behaviors are more natural. And it's also said that people tend to express themselves more in social media, given the anonymity and wide accessibility as well. So we can actually consider social media behaviors as a proxy for offline behaviors to study this emotion behavior. Okay. And this is another model that we have come up in the research. Call it the reciprocal flow of emotion information between natural and digital environments. So I'll explain this using an example. So basically the idea is that whatever happens in the natural environment, it can be a personal event, a political event, or global event, it impacts the individual, and individual will react to that on digital environments. Uh, it's replicated in the digital environment. So for example, a tweet by Donald Trump can trigger many emotions in communities and individuals, which can create a lot of reactions in the digital environment. So these whatever happens in the digital environments can actually impact the individuals as well. So social media can be used also as a reflection of the events in natural environment. So this flow actually tells why it's important to capture these behaviors. Another example is that there's lots of research on teenagers having mental health issues because of the use of social media. So whatever happens in the digital environment can directly impact the individual, which makes it even more important to capture the emotion dynamics and behaviors in social media. Okay, so this brings to the second research question. So, how does these theories, inspired by these theories, how we can develop computational models which can capture emotion dynamics in the digital environment, and what are their limitations? So, first of all, I'll talk about the limitations of current computational models that have been used. So, this is threefold. First, I'll talk about the challenges in affective computing research. So the research on affective computing shows that although there's many applications, there's need for cognitive modeling. There's a further research needs to be done in cognitive modeling, and also how uh, because some most of the data are created in artificial lab environments, how we can capture natural emotion behaviors in these digital systems, and how to use these models to correspond to real behaviors in people. And challenges in traditional machine learning approaches. This corresponds to what I mentioned earlier also. So lack of label data, and this is context dependent as well. So emotions represented in one context might be different from the other. So having a label data with prior knowledge for all of these would be a practical challenge. And one of the key things highlighted by most of the theories is the individuality of emotions, which is important to capture. And the volatility of emotions can also impose limitations for traditional machine learning approaches. Next, so challenges in emotion modeling in social media. So there's plenty of research being done to detect emotions from social media data, mainly using Twitter and other forms of social media. But most of the emotion-oriented approaches focus on detecting the emotion. So once we take a tweet or a post, we classify that emotion, that post as joy or anger or sad. So that type of emotion category classification is done in most of the approaches. But what it lacks is to model the emotions, to capture the emotion dynamics, the individualities, and the group emotions. So those are the things which are lacking from social media emotion detection research. And also, recent research on affective computing in social media for sentiment analysis, they have mentioned that next generation sentiment and emotion analysis should be motivated by brain inspired and psychological motivated reason. So in that way, we can actually derive emotions to learn new affective knowledge. And that leads us to systematically investigating emotion dynamics in these digital environments. So these are the current challenges or the limitations and gaps in current literature. So to address these, we have come up with certain computation models, which I will explain next. So, so we have the social media conversations over time, and the feature extraction is actually detecting the emotion from textual data. That is to classify a post as anger, angry, sad, or fear. That part. So most of the approaches stop at this point, and what we propose is to extend that to develop different computational models which can then inform these emotion theories like regulation dynamics, capturing individualities and group emotions. So I will talk about these 5 components next with their relevance to the theories. Okay, so first of all, about the feature extraction, how we detect the emotions from the text, we use a word embedding approach, unsupervised approach, mainly because of the unavailability of emotion label data. So as I mentioned, because emotions are context dependent, the emotion capturing classifiers or trained algorithms we use in health domain might not be useful for the sports domain because the emotion expressions people use are different. And therefore, there's a practical limitation in obtaining label data for different contexts. Therefore, we use this unsupervised approach of generating a word embedding for the data. So what we do is based on our data set, we train a word embedding which can capture closely associated terms together. So once we query for each emotions and related words, we can get a vector of closely associated words. So in that way, based on the presence of those emotion expressions, we can classify a text as with the emotion category. Also, we conduct an emotion enrichment for the derived label. So we first handle the negation by identifying what the emotion and the negation expressions. And also we use the emotion intensifiers. So most of the research in my thesis is based on this emotion model. So it's called the Plutchik's wheel of emotions. It has 8 basic emotions in the middle layer, and it has 3 levels of intensity per each emotion. So rather than just getting this middle layer basic emotions, we have expanded that to capture all 3 levels by adding the intensifiers. So for example, extremely happy and not really excited, although both are classified as joy, we can adjust the intensity based on these expressions. So these intensity expressions are taken from a well-cited library, Valence Surveyor Dictionary and Sentiment Reasoner. Okay, so this is the component 1, the emotion intensity profile. So the derived emotion intensities are used to create an intensity profile, and this actually aligns with the emotion dynamics theory where they mention that emotion episode can be represented using the intensities of emotions, and we can represent these profiles for an individual or for a situation. Uh, so these are the two intensity profiles of two individuals. As we can see, there's different emotion intensities expressed for different people. So this can be used for emotion maintenance as well, where we can identify the decrease or increase of a certain emotion and what we can do to regulate that. So as I mentioned, it fits in the emotion intensity shape, emotion episode aspect of the emotion dynamics theory. Next component is the emotion transitions. So the idea or the foundation of emotion transitions is coming from the core theories of affective computing. In affective computing, one of the assumptions is that emotion is can be considered as the smallest and most fleeting unit of a state, and these emotions interact with each other, and they can transition between each emotion. So a person who is joy can go into sad and then come back to joy again and then go to anger. So these type of emotion state changes we can model, and we can actually associate probabilities for these state changes. So using the feature extraction component, we derive the emotions of social media conversations over time, which will generate a sequence of emotions for a person. And then using that sequence, we have created a transition model using Markov models, where we represent each emotion as a state, and the uh, transitions of between these emotions as transition probabilities. So these transition models can be used to represent an individual, a group, or a situation as well. So emotion transitions can have multiple purposes. One is that because it combines emotion information over a period of time, it has the prediction capabilities as well. So what you see here is a patient's emotion trajectory over time in 90 minutes of a live cancer chat forum. And we have modeled their transitions in every 30 minutes. So we can see how the transitions change over time. And using the Markov models, we can also build memory into that by using a higher order of Markov models. That is, for example, based on two previous states of emotions, we can predict what will be the next emotion state based on the probabilities. So we have tried this on one of the social media conversation data sets. I will show that in the application section. And also emotion transitions can be used to model group emotions. So this shows the aggregation of emotion transitions to represent a particular group of people. And in this group of people, we can identify what are the most prominent emotion transitions. And if we do this for other groups, different social media groups, we can see what are the emotional differences in these groups as well. This can be useful for comparing and identifying who are the most agitated groups, and how we can use intervention techniques to handle those situations. And this is another visualization just to show that within one group, how different individuals behave differently. So this is actually based on one conversation in social media. So in an online forum, there will be different people, multiple people sharing ideas and expressing different types of emotions. And we have modeled in a holistic view, we can see how are the emotions have changed for each person. So each person is represented in one color. In that way, we can identify who are the most negatively people who express more negative emotions, and who are more expressive, and who have less intensity of emotions. So these type of models can be used to monitor emotions in a moderated environment. Next, this emotion translation model actually complies with the theories of self-organizing systems as well. So in research by Izard, there's properties of emotions as self-organizing systems. There are a couple of properties that they have described in theory, which is applicable for emotion transitions. So first one is in a self-organizing system, there's the triggering of other affect states that calls for recursion. And then there's emergence of unique forms and patterns. So these are based on they are highly condensed area. And over time, some patterns become consolidated. So we can regard the transitions with high probabilities as consolidated patterns. And that can actually lead to predictability as well. So based on the consolidated patterns, we can predict other next emotion states and changes. And the fourth one is it's constrained on system information. So it differs for each individual and or each event or situation as well. So the emotion transition, we can consider that as a to have the properties of a self-organizing system, which can be useful for identify different aspects. In aligned with the emotion dynamics theory, emotion transitions and predictions can be used to model some of the emotion trajectory aspects of this theory as well. Okay, so the next component is emotion pathways. So we know that humans or animals, everyone is, our core is designed based on the DNA sequences that are unique to us. So while biological DNA sequences represent our nature, so can emotion sequences add another dimension to represent an individual? So it will be another perspective to identify a individual based on the emotion pathways. So that motivated the implementation of emotion pathways. So in social media, we use the data, chronologically ordered data as the input, and the emotions sequences as the input. And I've implemented that using a tree algorithm with customizations to update the weight on each node. So for example, we can feed in emotion sequences as input. So these can be different conversations happen during different times for an individual, from which we can model different pathways. So this represent an different emotion trajectories of an individual as well. So for visualization purposes, I just marked the positive emotions in blue and negative in red. So you can see there are positive emotion trajectories as well as very negative ones and mixed emotion pathways as well. So emotion sequences, we can identify a couple of properties in this computational component. One is the activation of a emotion, which gives a start to an emotion pathway. The persistence is how long a person would stay in the same emotion state, which can be denoted by the weight of each node. And switch is how a person will change from one emotion to the other. So these characteristics can be captured by emotion pathways, and we can use them in computational, we can use them to characterize emotions in digital spaces. And also we can identify different individualities. So if we compare these emotion pathways of different people, we can identify most travel pathways and what are the most prominent pathways based on the weight of the nodes, as well as based on different characteristics, like this pathway is entirely positive, this pathway is entirely negative, likewise. And it aligns with the emotion pathways, emotion dynamics theory as well, where we can model the variability over time. Next is the component is emotion latent representation or profiling. So we know that emotions are highly subjective to individuals. So it is difficult to mark clear boundaries of emotions and give labels. So we've used an unsupervised approach using growing self-organizing maps, the GSOMs, to generate a latent representation of an individual's emotion. And once the GSOM is trained with the individual's data, when new input comes in, we can see where it positions itself in this representation. And based on the proximity of the other data points, we can actually classify or assign a label to that new input. So I will talk more about this in the experiment section. And this is another example of how this was developed to model group emotions. So this example is the GSOM is trained based on emotion intensities of participants as the input, and it learns and projects this as how different emotions, individuals are positioned in this representation. So based on the close proximities, we can identify regions where people have similar emotion characteristics. So once a new input or a new person's emotion intensities are introduced, the GSOM will be able to classify or identify where it fits in this representation. So we can actually enable unsupervised classification using this component as well. Next component is toxicity detection. So this is slightly deviated from the emotions. So this is toxicity is indicates another level of negativity, and we have added this component to enrich the findings from the emotions. So this was actually trained using a label dataset provided in one of the machine learning competitions. They had thousands of tweets with labeled the toxicity category. These were the toxicity categories, and developed a deep learning based multi-label classifier using glove word embedding, bidirectional RNN and CNNs to label the tweets or the social media posts based on the toxicity class. So those were the 5 components of computational models, and these components can actually represent an individual's emotion representation. So if we talk about the emotion individuality, we can use these components to show different aspects of a person's emotions, as well as this can be applied to a group or a situation as well. So as implications, we can use these to identify different emotion dysregularities and emotional reactivity and different personality traits as well. So very quickly going on this, so emotion individuality, there's the theories suggest that persistency factor, which I indicated earlier, like how likely a person to stay in the same emotion state for a long time. So these characteristics can be captured from the emotion pathways and transition models, and we can actually differentiate different individuals based on these factors. So next is how to apply these components in real world scenarios. So I will go through some of the selected applications as to showcase the use of these components in real world social media data. So given the time limitations, I'll quickly go through each of the applications. So this is actually the third research questions. How can the identification of emotion dynamics in these data intensive digital environments advance the AI systems in digital health, smart cities, communities, and industrial settings? So the applications span across individuals, organizations, and society and communities. So in this next couple of slides, I will showcase how these computational models were applied into sorry into each of these aspects. So first is the patient-centered healthcare. So this is I showed some of the examples earlier. I will quickly go through this. So this was done based on identifying emotion dynamics in mental health forums. So this relates to individual and group emotion modeling. So if we take social media, we know that online forums are a prominent source of social interaction. There's lots of people talking in online forums, and there's lots of data. So in this experiment, we have selected mental health forums, three forums specifically related to mental health issues. And the data set was based on close to 5,700 conversation threads, and each thread had around 10 to 15 posts. So using the computational models, we were able to capture emotion intensity profiles, transition analysis, and emotion profiling and classification. So this one here shows how how we can represent a different emotion, so different mental health issues in terms of emotion intensity profile. So you can see that anxiety, people who were more anxious, they have expressed more fear, while the bipolar condition, which is a condition where people uh, oscillate between positive to negative emotions, they have high intensity for joy and sadness. And the self-harm group is the extreme depression group, where they talk about suicidal thoughts. They have extreme intensity for grief. So capturing these emotion intensities can actually enable the regulation and intervention if it's a moderated environment to prevent any issues. And we've done the analysis for the transitions as well. So even in transitions, we can see different differences between each of the group. And from there, we can identify different emotion characteristics as well. And this is the experiments that we did using the GSOM. So we, based on the emotion intensities, we grouped different people based on their mental health condition, and we were able to get the classification into three clusters using k-means here, and group the participants based on their emotion intensities. And also using the trained GSOM, we use that to classify new input. So overall classification, we're able to achieve a 71.7 accuracy for the GSOM. And also based on the fact that it's an unsupervised approach where we don't have the labels for emotions, then that would actually be more suitable rather than the supervised approaches. And another application is applied to online cancer support groups. We did this with collaboration with Department of Urology in Austin Hospital, again to capture different emotion trajectories of patients and how these are different from different stages in their cancer journey. This was another interesting project actually, where we did individual and community emotion modeling with collaboration with D'Souza University Institute in Canada. And this actually was mostly, the requirement was they have a Cancer Chat Canada conversation platform, which is moderated by a therapist. And they wanted the AI system to identify the emotions, their engagements, and patients' information, and give real-time feedback to the therapist so they can improve their process. So we've tested this on around 80,000 conversations from their system, and were able to get the real-time emotion analysis and all these features deployed. So they are using this currently. They are beta testing it, and it's about to be deployed in a couple of weeks. So this is a snapshot of the report that they sent to the therapists at the moment. So based on what people talk about, we generated the emotion analysis and send that back to therapist as feedback. Okay, so another application to apply emotion dynamics in a smart city environment. So this was based on community emotion modeling. The experiment was based on a self-driving car incident where self-driving car has killed a person. And to see the emergence of emotions over time, we've collected Twitter conversations a couple of months before the accident, during the week of the accident, and after the accident. And we modeled the emotion transitions in these three stages. And we were able to see different patterns emerging in different time periods. So from a more positive emotions during the week of accident, the anger, sad, and fear were more prominent. And after a couple of months, it actually normalizes as well. So it shows the shift and emergence of emotions within a community. And also we use the toxicity classifier also because an event like that can create lots of noise in social media because it's a person being killed. So, and these negative emotions can be very contagious as well. So therefore we try to capture the toxicity of emotions during these stages and actually notice that it goes up during that week and then decreases, although it's higher than the previous few months. And another experiment is to embed these computational models in a chatbot. So what happens in a chatbot is there's the input layer where a person types in a message, and there's the response where the chatbot generates an answer to the query. So we proposed adding a middle layer here, which captures the emotions of a person, detects the emotions, models, and predicts the next state of emotions. So using that information, we can actually customize the response. So the emotion prediction was used in this one using Twitter conversations with a chatbot. And there was a 72% accuracy in the prediction when we used data from historical data from a chatbot application. And another community emotion modeling, I'll quickly show this. This we applied to more recent incident. So emotion dynamics during COVID-19. So we collected around 73,000 tweets from January to September, which corresponded with different stages in the COVID pandemic. And it was interesting to note that how the emotions change over time on people's expressions on Twitter. And also there was a significant increase in negative emotions when we compare the first and the second lockdown, which is acceptable. And also we were able to profile different people based on the concerns and emotions they have expressed as well. So we use the GSOM to create these citizens profiles where it shows where some people are more concerned about work, some are more concerned about family or panic mind. So this type of classic segmentation based on emotions can actually help to identify the community in the digital environments. And then also a couple of applications in tourism and tourism using online hotel reviews to identify emotions, and in transport to get emotions from Twitter. And this is an application for sports where we did emotion analysis based on some football clubs. And this was an experiment we did with online forums dedicated to education, how students talk about different universities and their issues. And also some of the recent projects where we modeled community emotions using social media data for a couple of social media campaigns. One was violence against women, and one for responsible gambling. So all these we were able to capture different emotion characteristics expressed in these platforms. So that's that's the work that I've done in the research related to my 3 research questions and the computational models and the applications. As future directions, this research can be extended to use of multimodalities, because the computational components, we don't have to rely only on social media data. So once we extract the emotion features, those can be used for any of the models to model emotion dynamics in digital. And also for social media environments, there's improvements to be done for the feature extraction with current research on how we can identify irony, sarcasm, idioms, which can actually impact the emotion detection. And these are the publications originated from this research. And some of the publications are under review and working on a couple of them as well. And some of the collaborations. So collaborations related to some of the projects and research we did related to patient-centered healthcare, emotion analysis on social media, and also using AI for stroke rehabilitation research. So that concludes my research presentation. And deviating from the formal presentation, I would like to take 1 minute to thank all of you, especially my supervisors, Professor Daminda and Professor Dustin. Thank you for being wonderful mentors throughout these years. So all these projects and the publications, I think they all came from your guidance. And thank you very much for that. And last but not least, thank you, the CDAC team. So we have collaborated a lot, and we have some enjoyable and fun memories as well. So I can say it has truly been a wonderful journey. So thank you everyone for listening in, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.